Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of that Selders crew, the parentTEAing section. After last week, we had some questions sent in regarding the discipline topic. So today we're going to do another episode of part 2 to discipline. Parents, you ready?
Yep.
All right, so question number 1. It's very hard figuring out what is uncomfortable for my child. Can you give me examples of uncomfortable consequences?
First of all, I think there are 2 points I would like to make. The first one is uncomfortable sometimes takes a little trial and error, especially when your children are younger. You have to figure out by implementing consequences sometimes whether or not it is uncomfortable, because sometimes you can implement a consequence and it doesn't seem uncomfortable and you realize, okay, the next time I might have to try something a little differently. The second thing is uncomfortable changes as they grow. Like what worked for instance, our daughter when she was, 4 or 5 doesn't necessarily work for her now that she's 17. Or what didn't work then sometimes works now. So for example, when she was little, she was not a toddler who had a problem with timeout. Like if you gave her a timeout, she would be in timeout figuring out what else to get into. Now at 17, she does not like being isolated. She does not like to feel as though we are not talking to her, or we are excluding her, or asking her to sit aside for a minute. Michael, you want to share some?
Yeah, I'll give you an uncomfortable consequence. So for instance, our children are responsible for washing dishes. So let's say if we find that in the course of washing dishes, there are a lot of dishes that still have food on them. They didn't do a really good job. So one consequence may be, an uncomfortable consequence would be taking all the dishes out the drawer, taking all the dishes, the plates out the cabinets, and they have to wash everything and wash them over. So not only are you washing
Clean or dirty?
the plates that you clean, you have to go back and wash the clean plates that were in the cabinets as well. Now, see, to me, that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But not only that, but you make them do it at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
If you go to bed,
If you go to bed
without doing your dish duty, then we're gonna get you up out of your sleep.
Yeah, so you got to break that sleep to make it uncomfortable. And see, what happens is they remember that next time. So that's uncomfortable.
Another good example that works for what we consider is our adult child in the adult stages is we interrupt his finances. So we had
Can I take over here?
Yeah, you can
Absolutely.
That's a good point. You have to know what's uncomfortable for your child. Freshman year of college, went off to college, and I decided I wanted to get my ears pierced. And I did so, of course, without consulting my parents. And finances are very important to me. Money, I value money. And after they found out, we had the conversation or whatever. But the verdict after that first conversation was, take the earring out. I didn't take the earring out. However, I checked my bank account and there was nothing to check. And I was looking at no money in here anymore. And that was very uncomfortable because it shocked me. It literally had me mouth open and where my money?
Where his money? Where our money?
Yeah. And that desire for an earring, earring, ugh. I want an earring? Why would I want an earring? I want my money. So they quickly faded. Just to throw that out there.
And I thought about that was, okay, well, if you are grown and adult enough to make your own decisions and you feel like our opinion and our views don't matter, we feel like, okay, well, maybe, our money shouldn't matter either. So we'll just take our money back and our support in that area and we'll let him make his own decisions.
And in talking to him and trying to get his understanding, like, what were you thinking? Because clearly, we are anti, holes in the ears for young men, people. At least for our children, let me just say that. Our sons, we don't want them with earrings. Like, what were you thinking? And his response was, well, I felt like, I waited till I got out of the house. I was grown, and so I thought it would be okay. And so that was a point in which we had to remind him, grown people take care of themselves. Grown people do not use any part of their parents' money in any way. So because he considered himself grown, because he considered himself grown with the ability to make a grown person's decision, we decided you are going to make those kinds of decisions without our financial assistance.
Independent.
So we pulled every dollar out of his account.
And cent, every dollar and cent.
We pulled everything out of his account, and
zero.
We told him, you figure out how to do this without our assistance.
So we felt like that was uncomfortable. So a lot of it just comes down to you finding what works for that child. Each child is different, so it all boils down to the individual child.
Question number 2. All right. Experts and researchers describe your type of parenting as authoritative, and many believe authoritative parents destroy good qualities in children, such as independence, leadership, creativity, and confidence. What are your thoughts about that?
So parenting styles are really like a psychological construct or way that parents parent their children. The standards they choose, the practices they implement, and there are 4 types. And of the 4, you have authoritarian, authoritative, permissive, and then you have those who are neglectful. So authoritative is actually the one that we're seen as is actually the one that has the best and the highest outcome for producing leaders. Part of it is authoritarian parents are the ones who usually squash those potentials that were mentioned earlier. And in part is because authoritarian parents are those who are very coercive, they're very forceful, and they are not warm as parents. Whereas authoritative parents are those who are usually more democratic, very laid back, yet very stern and demanding, but they have high expectations for their children. So for us as authoritative parents, we believe that, we want to hear what our children have to say, but at the end of the day, we believe that we are the ones who are responsible for enforcing certain rules. We're not going to force you to do something. We're going to enforce you to do it. So that's the difference between authoritative parents versus authoritarian parents. We consider ourselves as authoritative.
I personally don't pay much attention to what the researchers say. I try not to let those things dictate how we parent our children, because I feel like the researchers and the so-called experts are not the people who've been given this responsibility. We know what our end goals are for our children, and so we parent with those end goals in mind. When you talk about things like independence, leadership, confidence, I think those things are very difficult if you don't instill in your children responsibility, humility, interdependence, a sense of commitment to community, patience, and most of all, delayed gratification. I think there's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, and sometimes when children are free to just do whatever they want, or there's no guide, no control, no parameters in which they have to do these things, then it's very easy that they will grow up to be people who don't possess those qualities that are responsible, those qualities that are necessary for, leaders and movers and shakers and independent people. So I don't necessarily support the idea that because I have a sense of control, because I decide that I am going to regulate certain things, and that I am going to have a say as far as my children are concerned, that in some reason they won't possess the potential to be a leader, or they won't possess the potential to be empowered, or they won't possess the ability to be free thinkers. I think because we've enforced certain rules, they have the ability to be patient. They understand delayed gratification. They are kind. They are caring. All of those things. And so that's what I think about that.
Okay. Another question we received. It says, other people see my child's strong personality as defiant, and I disagree. This has created a major problem with my parents, some of my friends, as well as my child's teachers. They all believe I need to be firmer, and I believe they all need to be more patient and a little less judgmental of my parenting. How do you suggest dealing with loved ones who see your child as a problem when you do not?
It's a good one.
It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think part of the role and the idea of parenting is to socialize and train your children to be able to work with other people. Your parents, your other family members, people outside the house. And you do have to take into consideration that everybody is not going to deal with your children the way that you do. So when we're raising our children or rearing our children, we have to think about the fact, are we rearing children who can work with other people? So I do think when you parent, part of parenting is from that perspective. So it is important to think about how other people think about your children, because you might allow your child to do something one way at home, but when they are out in the world, if there are rules and norms that say that's not appropriate, you also have to be mindful of that as a parent. Like, you can't just allow your children to rant and rave all over the house and scream and fall out, and then they get in the store and you have other people in the store who are looking at you strange. If that behavior is not normal or not condoned in the store, that's something you have to deal with. And you can't expect other people to sort of parent the same way you do. So I think you have to parent from the perspective of teaching your children to be able to follow the norms and the rules outside of your house as well.
I absolutely support everything Dad said. I don't think that parent shaming or parent judging is a good thing. However, I really do believe in the value of the village. If you said, some stranger in the park who knows nothing about me and nothing about my child has something to say about my kid, then I would be like, ooh, that's inappropriate. But when you talk about your parents, those are valuable people in your village. When you talk about your friends, those are valuable people in your village. When you talk about your child's teacher who spends a great deal of time with your child, I think all of those people are their opinions should be valued, and you should think about what it is they're saying and exactly what it is Michael said. I know as a teacher, I can't deal with your kindergartner in the same way, with the same, I should say, my rope can't be the same length as yours, because, I'm holding on to 17 children, or I'm holding on to 20 children. So when I say something one time to your child, I need that child to respond immediately. When you're at home and it's just, your baby, it's very easy for you to say something 7 times or say something 9 times, and that's perfectly okay with you. But grandma might not want to do that. Grandpa might not want to do that. And so I think it's great when young children, or as young as possible, learn that, hey, I think the saying goes, when you're in Rome, sometimes you have to do as the Romans do. And so I think it's a great teachable moment for you to start teaching to your child that, hey, when Mrs. Selders says X, Y, and Z, this is how you need to respond in this environment. When grandma and grandpa says certain things, this is how you need to respond in that environment. And maybe self-assess some things that you need to do differently as a parent to have a different response from your child as well. And talk to those people about the way you feel. Like, talk to those people about, share your perspective, but at the same time, listen to their perspective and see if you can find some common ground.
To kind of add to that, another point I think is important is, it's critical for you to also, as you said, self-assess, to look at whether or not the people in your village are the problem, or if you might be part of that problem. If you're expecting other people to parent and do what you do, that's also reinforcing for that child, an issue as well. That child has to move out into a world where the rules outside of the house might be very different from those inside the house, and they have to be able to conform to that. So I think it's important to village from that parent from that village perspective, like Tameka mentioned.
Okay, 4th question. I love your breakdown of the ICU of discipline, and I realize my spouse and I struggle the greatest in the area of consistency. When I say consistency, I mean we're not consistent in our parenting practices and thoughts about discipline. How do you discipline children when you're married to someone who doesn't believe discipline is necessary?
Sheesh. I think you have to do what you can. I mean, if one person doesn't believe that it's necessary to discipline, but they respect the fact that the other person still enforces it, I think if one person can enforce something, that's better than nothing. I mean, it's hard when both parents are on two different pages about how discipline ought to be enforced or instilled in the home. But I do think it's important for that parent who is okay with discipline, they have to enforce it where they see fit. But I don't think the child just should be allowed to do whatever whenever they want to. Somebody has to instill the discipline, or else the child will never get it.
I think the goal should be to present to the children a united front. And so in every relationship, parenting relationships, marriages, friendships, family relationships, there are non-negotiables. There are things you decide, hey, I cannot deal with this. And so I think if the two parents sit down, understanding that they have varying opinions about discipline, but decide, how are we going to give and take, right? Like this right here, I cannot do this. And the other parent might say, okay, then I'll give a little on that, but this right here, I cannot do. However, those conversations, those disagreements need to happen away from the children, because as far as the children are concerned, they need to be convinced beyond any doubt. They need to be absolutely convinced that you all are a united front. And sometimes that means one person will have to bite their lip and save the conversation for later. But it's so productive, it's so important when your children see you as a united front. Because what happens is, if they pick on that, one parent feels this way and another parent feels another way, they will capitalize on that thing. So I think even when there are differences, obvious differences, you just create a way to not have those differences be highlighted in front of your children.
Can I add to that? I also think it's important to pay attention to, sort of like my mom said, the capitalizing on, one parent maybe being more lenient than the other. The results or the way that the child reacts or behaves to one form of discipline versus another. Because I think discipline is often thought of as, punishment or something negative, but maybe your discipline should just be restructured in a way to where it doesn't seem like, to the child, I can get over, on this parent, I can't get over on this parent. And that's also something that should happen, away from the child. But I think that in order to maintain the consistency that was mentioned in the question, it has to be something where the child can't see a difference between, if I do this in front of this parent, I may or may not get away with it. But I know that if I do it in front of this parent, that's not going to fly. But they have to approach both of you in the same way to know that, okay, they agree on this. This is a standard. And so my behavior is going to have to be, indicative of the fact that I understand that this is what the discipline structure is. This is what I can and this is what I can't do. And so I think that's important too, as far as consistency goes.
Good deal.
Good deal.
And that is all that we have for this episode of Parenting with the Selders. Stay tuned for more videos. Remember to comment any questions, send any questions that you may have to the page, and we will be sure to respond to you in the next video. Peace.
All right.